Probably that is what is mentioned, freedom from one. And finally, freedom from FEAR, freedom from fear. Obviously, when you're talking about freedom from fear, we're not talking about freedom from fear of the dacoits or the bandits. We're talking about freedom of fear of the executive penetrating into our lives and doing something which makes our life rather less peaceful. That is where we are. Do we have problems in this area? Well, probably where if there is someone who has alignment or sort of sympathy for the Bangladesh Nationalist Party would say, obviously we have problems here. Yesterday was the example that we had problems. Then we couldn't assemble the way we wanted. Now again, let me quote from an American president, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt mentioned that no freedom is free, which means that freedom has to be purchased at a price. And what is the price? The price of freedom is, what do you say, forbearance and limitations. So there are, no freedom is a license, no liberty is a license. Harold Lasky. Now, but what are these limitations? Well, the only thing that the executive will put limitations, but are the limitations acceptable? They are acceptable as long as the limitations are reasonable. Now, which limitations are reasonable and which are not reasonable? I think the Minister for Law is here, and I understand the British High Commissioner, she is still here. Then they will vouch me that let me quote from Liversidge versus Anderson, 1946, the House of Lords. And what did it say? It said that these limitations, the reasonableness would depend not on any subjective criteria, but on objective criteria. So if the limitations are objective, if the restrictions are objective, that satisfies the criteria of restrictions, limitation, and then everything is fine. And whether these are reasonable, then the people will decide, and the law will take on its own side. But now, I think from this podium, I would not be lecturing on human rights jurisprudence, but let me take to something. Just 3-4 days back, the UN General Assembly, referring to 2023 as the year of peace, it adopted a resolution, and in that resolution, the main, I would say, the theme of the year has been designated as dignity, freedom, and justice for all. Dignity, freedom, and justice. Now we are talking about the dignity of a human being. We are talking about justice for all. We're talking about freedom. Now we talked about freedom a bit. Now let me just talk a bit on dignity and excess and justice. Justice, is something that cannot be defined. There is no universal definition of justice, what justice is. Amartya Sen wrote a huge book, The Idea of Justice, but then there is no definition of justice because there exists no definition of justice. But in any single situation of injustice, we understand that justice has been violated. That is the understanding of justice. Then how do we really achieve justice? And what is the correlation with dignity? Because, the famous quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King. What does this say? Because this is intricately related to dignity of a human person. Sometimes I tell my students that the essence of human rights is human dignity, nothing more and nothing less. And when this word is so precious to us, we, the people of Bangladesh, we love this word dignity so much. Why? We're in love with this particular word. Why? Because it takes us back to 1971. The Proclamation of Independence, April 10, 1971 in Mujibnagar. And the proclamation, and probably my foreign friends would be knowing that only 2 countries in the world have been blessed with the Declaration of Independence or the Proclamation of Independence. One is the United States of America, and the other is the People's Republic of Bangladesh. And in this small 2-page document, Proclamation of Independence, it says, why did we wage this war of liberation? in order to ensure for the people of Bangladesh equality, social justice, and human dignity. That's the reason that the world is so precious to us, so close to our heart. And we want to, protect and preserve and promote human dignity. And in order to ensure dignity, we must ensure justice to all. Justice doesn't happen if there is no access to justice. And access to justice has so many different ingredients and factors dependent for it to become something which is enjoyable, something which is attainable, something which is doable. But for this, the problems are there. And the problems are both domestic and international. Well, everyone in this country knows that I'm a very severe critic of the limitations of the country. So I'll not be repeating the critique I generally make in this forum. But let me take on a bit, a different angle, and let me talk some of the international dimensions to this problem. And what are these international dimensions? We're talking about dignity and freedom and access to justice and so on and so forth. But you see, my dear friends, the whole jurisprudence of human rights, this have been invalidated by Western Europe and America after the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. Why? Because we have seen that there is nothing known as universal human rights. There are European human rights and there are Asian human rights. There are American human rights and there are African human rights, but nothing universal human rights. Had there been universal human rights, then the Minister of Human Rights of Poland would not have pronounced, hey, these Ukrainian refugees look like us. They don't look like Syrians, Afghans, or Palestinians, or Rohingyas. They have blue eyes, they're white. They are someone with whom we can live as neighbors. My good God. And Mr. Hanan, please excuse me if I am naming and shaming. At times, as an academic, I can resist, being emotional and tell the truth, nothing but the truth and only truth. And the truth is that these human rights, international rights, refugee rights, they have been trampled, and they have been forgotten by the Western Europe and United States of America today. This is the truth. My dear friends, take it or leave it, but this is the truth I talk about. Now you see, fine, whenever there is an unnatural death, believe me, as a human being, I feel very sad. I am pretty sure that everyone here in this auditorium, you also don't want to hear any incidents of unnatural death of a human being. But things do happen. We are mournful, we solve their death. And if a diplomat also expresses condolence, there's no harm in that. But when a diplomat chooses one death versus 3 deaths happening on the same day in Palestine and killed by the Israeli forces, but no condolence, no message, nothing, then that raises a few questions in our minds. Is a Bangladeshi death more painful than the Palestinian deaths? I don't know the answer. I leave the answer to the diplomats who are issuing that kind of condolences and messages. Do they have a political message? Well, Minister, both Foreign Minister and all, I don't know. I don't know. I'm purely an academic, teaching law in the university. So I don't know whether there is politics behind it. But to me, it raises a few questions that why do they behave the way they should behave? And that takes me to the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Very specific. The few conventions of the United Nations which are very crystal clear. One of the conventions is the 1961 Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Very clear what a diplomatic mission and diplomats can do and cannot do in a country, and what you can do. So if everything has been narrated and elaborately detailed out, I don't teach international law to the foreign diplomats. I teach international law to our young diplomats of this country. And I know that my students of international law, Your Excellency, the students of the Foreign Service Academy, they will never do anything which would be violative of the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. That is where Bangladesh stands as a country. And for your patient hearing, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman. Now I have the pleasure to invite our newly appointed chairperson of the National Human Rights National Human Rights Commission, Dr. Kamaluddin Ahmed. Sir.